Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengausen. Today is October 21st, and there will be a lot of interesting news. In this episode, Zelensky and European leaders made a joint statement calling for an immediate ceasefire, exactly what Donald Trump wanted. And once again, the Kremlin is being forced into the splits, it seems. The meeting between Trump and Putin in Budapest is on the verge of falling through. And who is promoting the idea that the British are planning to eliminate Putin, and why? In Budapest, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service declared that NATO is preparing a lightning war against Russia, how China has trapped the US in a resource trap, and the special tribunal on Putin is starting its work. And Poland announced that it will land and arrest the plane carrying the Russian dictator, if necessary. What's happening with all this and more in today's episode? There will be a lot of interesting things, especially if this is your first time on this channel. Be sure to subscribe. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So once again, they're trying to put Putin in a tough spot, and quite skillfully, by the way. Volodymyr Zelensky, together with European leaders, supported Donald Trump's proposal for an immediate ceasefire. This is stated in today's joint statement, which was published on the website of the President of Finland. And I quote, "We are united in our desire for a just and lasting peace, which the people of Ukraine deserve. We firmly support President Trump's position on the need for an immediate ceasefire and that the current line of contact should serve as the starting point for negotiations." The document says, earlier Donald Trump himself explicitly stated, and I quote, that they should stop precisely where they are. He means Russia and Ukraine. So Trump is calling for a halt along the line of contact. The joint statement by the President of Ukraine and European leaders is about the same thing. What is Putin supposed to do? He doesn't want this. Once again, he's been cornered. Meanwhile, Russia is doing everything it can to disrupt a possible meeting between Trump and Putin in Budapest. Yes, you heard that right. It's Russia that's trying to do this. In other words, Russia is denying, it turns out, that a preliminary meeting at the level of foreign ministers and the head of the State Department, Marco Rubio, is planned. On the Russian side, that's Lavrov. Russia denies that the meeting was postponed, since you can't postpone something that hasn't been agreed upon yet. Trump personally stated that Rubio and Lavrov will have a call now, then meet, and only after that will there be a meeting at the highest level. And it turns out that Russia hasn't agreed on anything yet. So when they corner the Kremlin and say, come on, let's have a meeting at the level of the foreign ministers Rubio and Lavrov, the Russians respond, no, we're still far from even having that meeting. Well, who would have doubted it? I bet this time it will be the same as all the previous times. You misunderstood us again. A favorite Russian trick to buy time. And as a result, CNN reports that the meeting between Trump and Putin next week in Budapest may be cancelled. See, what a surprise. And then there's the rumor that the British supposedly want to eliminate Putin in Budapest. Wow. See how sneaky and devious they are. The British want to disrupt the Trump-Putin talks, so of course, they need to eliminate Putin. Actually, this rumor, soon we'll get to who started it, comes from a very interesting character, and whose interests are involved as well. We'll discuss that too. So, this rumor about an assassination attempt on Putin being prepared in Budapest was, of course, spread on one of the main Russian propaganda shows. So, Putin was warned about a monstrous British plot to kill him if he goes to Hungary, even though the Hungarians themselves, Szijjártó, the foreign minister, are all smiles, ready to welcome Putin with bread and salt. He'll leave safe and sound, and so on. And do you know who made this statement about the British wanting to eliminate Putin? Colonel Andrei Bezrukov of Russian Foreign Intelligence, a former illegal agent of the Foreign Intelligence Service who worked undercover in the US and Canada. And he made this statement on the air of Sunday Evening with Solovyov. That's a completely unhinged Russian propagandist, but I think many people know him. So, this SVR colonel, a spy who was exposed in 2010. He suggested moving the meeting from Budapest to Dubai. Well, there's a whole separate story with this spy and his wife about how they emigrated to Canada under a cover story back in 1987. How old was I then? I was 6 years old at that time. That's when I had already started school. And he was already spying, this Bezrukov guy. and they gathered information until 2010, until a defector exposed an entire network, including them. They were uncovered as part of what was called the Ghosts Cooperation. Then they were arrested, and soon after Russia exchanged them, since apparently they were quite valuable operatives for the Kremlin. So basically, this SVR colonel is making a statement. This is yet another reason why Putin might not fly, and so on. So, what do we have left at the end of the day? For now, Putin has achieved what he wanted. Trump has put the issue of tomahawks and sanctions aside, and Donald Trump himself continues to be deceived. I'm not going, they'll kill me there. And you didn't fly to Alaska anyway. We all saw that it was some flat-faced, stretched-out replicant who showed up there. So, there are still no specifics about the time and place of the meeting in Budapest. Whether it's Budapest or Dubai is still unclear. The Russians' tactics remain the same. As for a real threat, their tactics are very simple. If there's a real threat from the US, they immediately reach out to the United States, arrange a call, agree on some kind of meeting, drag things out, and if they're really pressed, they meet. But it's all for nothing, just like in Anchorage. No one. Trump left early, there was no dinner at all. There was no joint statement about anything. And then again and again, the same cycle repeats. When they're under pressure, again it's, come on, we want to. Let's meet in Budapest. And then suddenly, oh no, I can't. They want to kill me there. Well then, friends, wipe your screens with holy water. Now there will be a statement from the Foreign Intelligence Service where this spy actually served. And this statement will be from the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. And lately, he's really been tripping on some magic powder. He's been coming out with some truly out-of-this-world statements. So what did he say this time? So, the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, Naryshkin, accused NATO of preparing for war with Russia in a very short time frame. In other words, it turns out NATO is preparing a lightning-fast war against the Russian Federation. The countries that are part of NATO, European countries are openly preparing for war. The task has been set to provide all the necessary resources for NATO's designated forces in the shortest possible time. In Europe, the process of rapidly increasing the production of military goods has already begun. Mobilization measures are also being practiced, along with the brainwashing of the population, through propaganda about the inevitable aggression from Moscow. Wow! The head of the SVR named the reason for this as the fact that Europe, which has become accustomed to living under American occupation, I'm quoting here, since World War II, cannot adapt to the idea of a changing international reality. So that's how it is. In other words, Russophobia and the accelerated buildup of European military potential are all for a lightning war against Russia. Listen, I've said this many times already. When people say, and I regularly get messages calling me a Russophobe, no, in Ukraine there's no such thing as Russophobia. It's not a phobia here. No one is afraid of Russians. Here it's hatred of Russians, contempt for Russians. So maybe we need to put it a little differently. Maybe we should choose our words more carefully. There's no Russophobia, not here anyway. I don't know about Europe. Well, indeed, the process of producing military goods and ramping up volumes has begun. That's true. Children. So let's give Uncle Naryshkin, who's lost touch with reality, a hint about what actually caused Europe to build up its military potential and fear aggression from Moscow. And interestingly, what was that event when a bunch of spiteful KGB retirees, together with Naryshkin, by the way, decided to attack those they considered weak and start a 3-day victorious war that's been going on for the 4th year now? That's who wanted to start a lightning-fast war. They attacked Ukraine so badly that the main ball guy in the Kremlin now has no idea how to get out of this war, how to get away on his 10-centimeter heels in one piece. I know that this channel is watched in different countries around the world, on every continent. On the main channel, we have almost 460,000 subscribers, and on the English language channel, we'll soon reach 12,000. But we have subscribers from almost every country in the world. So, write in the comments, Especially those of you living in NATO countries. Do you really want to launch a lightning attack on Russia, a nuclear state, and I don't know, capture Syzran or Chita, for example, or maybe seize all these wonderful rundown towns with outdoor toilets where decay, gloom, and hopelessness reign? You dream about this, don't you? Do you want to? You want some action, as Putin says, right? So according to the 1.5-meter tall geostrategist, do you want some action? Do you wish to leave your beautiful cozy homes to end up somewhere in a frozen trench near Smolensk or Kaluga? You dream about this, don't you? But admit it, write in the comments. Narishkin thinks that this is exactly what you dream about, by the way. And to make it easier for you to seize not only the resources of Russians, but also Russia's money and gold, the Russian leadership deliberately keeps its assets with you in the West. Can you imagine how that works? I wonder how they explain this logic to Russians. And now, about those who are making the Russian army a little less alive and less capable of fighting, whether in a blitzkrieg or not. About Ukrainian heroes and Ukrainian defenders. Let me remind you, we have an important fundraiser going on for the legendary Azov, that is, the Special Forces Sniper Unit of the Azov Brigade. We are raising funds for reconnaissance drones for them, and they have personally reached out to us, to me, to you, to the viewers of this channel. Please listen.
Слава Україні! Ми загін снайперів спеціального призначення бригади Азов. Звертаємося до Бориса Тизенгаузена та його спільноти за допомогою. Для виконання спеціальних задач наш загін потребує розвідувальних дронів. Будемо вдячні кожному і кожній. Слава нації!
And now our segment, The Dragon Crept Up Unnoticed. At the end of this segment, I'll explain why no one needs to attack Russia or seize its resources. Well, this time the dragon was anything but paper, and it crept up unnoticed on the United States, even though it could be seen from afar. The US and China are now entering a new round of escalation in their trade war, but it's already clear how this war will unfold. In fact, China has caught the United States in a resource trap. The Financial Times has published a good piece about how China, if it wants to, can bring entire industries in the US to a halt. And to put it briefly, I'll add to this topic now, China currently holds a significant dominance in the rare earth metals and magnet supply chain. This includes extraction, processing, and the production of magnets and components. In other words, China accounts for about 70% of global extraction, 90% of separation and processing, and 93% of the world's production of permanent magnets. Recently, China has expanded export restrictions on rare earth metals and magnets, meaning that any goods containing even a small proportion of Chinese components now require permission from China. Why is that? I think it's clear to everyone. They saw how sanctions were circumvented, which were imposed against Russia, and decided to prevent that from happening. In other words, this is a preparatory step to strike at those who might want to help the United States circumvent restrictions if China suddenly imposes export restrictions on rare earth metals and magnets. So as of September this year, China has already reduced its export of magnets to the US by 30%. This is very serious. And now China is starting to cut off their sale to military factories. The US, meaning it's quite clear that they won't sell to other countries either. If these rare earth metal supply chains are disrupted, then the ability to produce high-tech military equipment and electronics may not just weaken, it could bring entire industries to a halt. So, as we've already discussed, China has finally found a way to deal with Donald Trump. But as for Donald Trump, to use his own language, what cards does he have in his hand? What trump cards does he have? Well, basically, Donald Trump, swinging his saber left and right, has mostly cut down his own people before finally reaching China. But what if China now tightens control over rare earth metals? What then? After a similar topic, someone wrote in the comments that now our agreement with the US, ours meaning Ukraine's, will be our trump card. Let them mine here now, everyone will benefit and will replace China in that regard. It's better they get it from us than from Russia. Let me remind you that Russia also has large reserves of explored rare earth metal deposits. But the problem isn't in finding and exploring them. That's not an issue. The problem lies in processing and extraction. So there are no issues with mining itself. 95% of the processing equipment and technology is usually Chinese. That's why Russia can make a limited offer to the US, but
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The United States sends up to 90% of the ore it mines to China in order to extract these rare earth materials. Just think about it. 90% of the ore is shipped to China to come back as rare earth elements. They can't do it themselves. Russia, for example, could also do it. They do have reserves and deposits after all. No. In 2010, when China was already building these vertically integrated chains from ore to magnets, Russia was simply exporting raw materials. Why is that? Because it's very expensive. At the initial stages, it's extremely costly. The Russians couldn't create their own base, so the result is they have the raw materials, but no industry. So overall, this is a big problem for the United States. It's a very big one, and really it's a trap. The United States got caught in it. And just to give you an idea of how things work in the US, they have a deposit, Mountain Pass, in California. It's the only major operating source of rare earth metals. The concentrate from there is taken and shipped off to China. That's it. They also didn't build the full production chain. So China, why did this happen? The United States, well, okay, Russia has always lived off its resources, but why did this happen in the US? China subsidized processing for decades. They managed to bring production costs significantly below Western standards. So trying to catch up with China now is pointless. Any disruption in the chain where the United States sends its ore, which is the Inner Mongolia region, a region in China, any disruption in this chain hits American manufacturers of electronics, electric motors, aviation, and defense equipment. That's what you call a dead end. Hello? So what else is China doing right now? Realizing that rare earth metal mining could become a trump card for Russia, including in trade negotiations with the United States, China is now stepping in and taking control of this sector in Russia. They are now investing in the joint development of the Tomto deposit. Moreover, the arrangement is set up so that China will have the priority right to purchase the concentrates if Russia is unable to process them there, and Russia won't be able to process them. At the same time, the Chinese are building a processing facility in the border town of Haihe, which is near Blagoveshchensk. In other words, they are taking full control of Russian deposits and extraction. And if China gains full control over Russian deposits, its share in global supply chains will rise to 97%. An absolute monopoly. That's all there is to it. So who outplayed whom here? Basically, well, it's obvious what the difference is. Xi Jinping can plan decades ahead. He knows he won't be leaving. Donald Trump, yes, he has, according to the law, his last term. After him, someone else will come. The policy will change, first the Democrats, then the Republicans, turning the ship in a different direction again, and so on. But Xi Jinping, when he came to power, he planned that in 30 years, he would push everyone out of the rare earth metals market. And that's exactly what he did. The point is, the whole world saw this perfectly well. Everyone has been writing about this, not just for a day, not just for a week, not just for a year. Everyone saw it, but there was no unity. So, in other words, China, you raised this monster yourselves. With your own hands, you moved all your production there. You yourselves are moving your factories there. Hello to Elon Musk and his supergiant Tesla factory. You yourselves raised this monster. When this monster decides to go to war or simply wants to cut off the world from rare earth elements, it will do so, and entire industries will come to a halt, not just in the US. So in general, Russia ultimately remains just a quarry, over which the Russian flag flies, but inside everything is Chinese. Just like the Russian auto industry, actually. They just stick a Moskvich logo on it, but inside it's Chinese, assembled by the Chinese from Chinese parts, that's it. And considering that this war has significantly weakened Russia and put it in such a harsh vassal position before China, handing over its natural resources to China is just a matter of time. So now, why is it that you don't need to attack Russia to take its resources? I'll answer this question mostly for Russians, by the way, who are always shouting, "You want our resources, you want our wealth." Let's start with the fact that they don't even belong to you. They belong to a limited group of people called the O0 Cooperative, those close to Putin. So no one is going to take anything away from you. Putin himself is now bowing and handing everything over to the East. Rare earth metals, forests, even leasing out land. While you Russians keep spitting your poisoned saliva toward the West, you won't notice when the East taps you on the back of the head and says, "Good evening." Here's another interesting piece of news. British soldiers will finally be given the right to shoot down drones that threaten military bases. According to the Telegraph, British soldiers really will soon receive such authority, but only for those drones that threaten military bases. Until now, the troops could only detect drones and jam them, but not shoot at them. Well, actually, at first, this rule will only apply over military bases, and then they'll see maybe it will be extended to airports as well. Let me remind you that in many democratic countries, in Europe, for example, they suddenly realized when drones started coming in from Russia or unknown drones began circling over their bases and airports, that by law, they couldn't shoot down drones over their own country. It's a paradox. In theory, this should be handled by the military, by air defense. But in democratic countries, there's a rule that over the territory of the state, in the civil airspace regulated by civil aviation, you can't shoot anything down. But in the military sector, the rules of defense and air defense apply, and the military sector is out there outside, so the military is responsible for what comes from outside. Inside, it's the police's responsibility, so the question is, how do you shoot something down then? And the problem is that over residential cities, neighborhoods, and airports, it's always civilian airspace. The military can only intervene by special order. That's why democratic states after World War II separated military and civilian powers. In other words, the army cannot operate on its own territory. And the preventive use of force within the country is a threat to freedom. So that, for example, some Democrat doesn't suddenly wake up and decide, no, I want to be a dictator. Army, go destroy everyone. Let's start military operations inside the country. To prevent this from happening, such a decision was made at the legislative level. The army does not shoot down anything or conduct any military operations within the country. Basically, for some Democratic leader to now have the ability to shoot down drones, in some countries even constitutional amendments are required. So, for example, remember the Chinese balloon that flew over the US for weeks and the Pentagon couldn't shoot it down right away because President Biden had to sign a written authorization. That's because it was flying over residential areas and the debris could have caused some damage, destruction, or even casualties. That's why they only shot it down over the ocean. So that's how it is. And just to remind you, some air defense missile systems have components that when shooting down an aerial object, whether it's a drone or a balloon, can cause significant damage to things on the ground. For example, this could be the booster stage of an air defense missile. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you feel like the whole world has gone crazy, maybe you're not wrong, so subscribe and let's gather here as the reasonable part of the global community and stand together. And of course, have your reasonable friends subscribe too. And as for the special tribunal for Putin, 26 countries of the European Union have agreed to participate, except for one. Kaja did not specify which country refused to join to the initiative, but let's make this a bonus question. Which country in the European Union doesn't want to put Putin on trial, doesn't want a special tribunal for Putin? Who is this mysterious pterodactyl of the world? Who is this oil lover? Who is this admirer of Putin's wrinkled backside? Who could it be, I wonder? Well, I think everyone has already figured it out. Who does Russia's work better than even perhaps some Russian officials themselves? It's Orban. By the way, in Moscow, they stated that they will consider any decisions of this tribunal to be null and void. And the official representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Zakharova, warned that those who join the special tribunal will be making a hostile move, which reflects a desire to worsen the crisis around Ukraine. Seriously? Yes. Well, maybe some people will say that no one is going to put Putin on trial, that this tribunal poses no threat to him at all. But who really knows? By the time Putin's own people start turning him in, all the evidence must be collected anyway. Dictators never believe that their end has come. Mussolini, Ceausescu, remember when I watched those chronicles when he was standing there on the podium just like now? He thought, I'll just say a few words, everyone will applaud me, but instead they started booing him. He got scared, they kept booing, he jumped into a helicopter and took off. A couple of days later, when he and his wife were being led to be executed, he still didn't understand. He didn't believe until the very end that it was really happening. Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, they too didn't believe until the very end that it was over, that their time had come. Hitler, until the very end, just like Putin now, by the way, kept insisting and believing in a miracle weapon. Just wait, it's coming, it's going to change everything. The course of the war. By the way, Putin could take a trip from the Kremlin to that reserve for dictators and losers, where Yanukovych and Assad live, and ask them just how quickly the regimes fell. Those regimes really did seem monolithic. I also won't get tired of reminding everyone that the International Criminal Court's warrant for Putin was issued because he stole Ukrainian children. Illegal deportation of children. Among dictators, I think that's the most shameful charge. And just so that at least once everyone would remember to remind the whole world what this Botox jellyfish really is. The Poles have released some very interesting information. The Polish Foreign Ministry has threatened to forcibly land Putin's plane and arrest Putin himself. If Putin flies to meet with US President Donald Trump in Hungary via Poland, his plane could be forced to land and the Russian president himself could be arrested under the warrant of the International Criminal Court, said Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. So it's clear that this isn't actually Putin's arrest, but these constant statements that he's an outcast, a dictator, a child thief, they need to be voiced all the time. The whole world always needs to be reminded what kind of paleo lizard is sitting there in the Kremlin. Every time he will be reminded that he is a war criminal. I think that if he does fly somewhere, if he flies at all to Hungary, he'll take a roundabout route through Bulgaria. They've already said there that they'll let him through, they won't put him in jail or drag him to The Hague by the leg. So he'll be flying over Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia and Hungary. That is, if he flies at all. And literally as I was recording this video, Russia's reaction to the first news, to the immediate summons, appeared. Regarding the immediate ceasefire called for by the Ukrainian president, European leaders, and previously by Donald Trump, Lavrov stated that a ceasefire along the front line without addressing the root causes of the conflict contradicts what Trump and Putin agreed upon during their meeting in Anchorage, Alaska. It's interesting, isn't it, that apparently something was agreed upon in Anchorage. That's exactly why, agreed as they may have, there was no joint statement. Trump simply left early, didn't even stay for lunch. And let's talk about addressing these so-called root causes of the conflict, which Lavrov, Zakharova, I don't know, all the Russian Foreign Ministry representatives and Putin keep harping on about. Although if you ask them what those are, let's break it down point by point. What are the root causes of this conflict? Everyone will give you a different answer. So regarding the elimination of this key cause of the conflict, do you have all the necessary tools for that in Russia? I mean, you could deal with this 1.5 meter tall root cause of the conflict with anything you like, a snuff box, an ice axe right there in the Kremlin, and that's it. That's the only reason for the war in Ukraine. He wanted to go down in history. Now Ukraine will show you some history. The problem is that Lavrov is also Putin. Peskov is Putin. Solovyov is Putin. The propagandist Simonyan is Putin. The toothless old woman shouting Putin is the president of peace. She's also Putin. It's all one collective Putin. Dealing with this root cause will be much more difficult, but we'll handle it too. And you, friends, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's support the legendary Azov. They really need our help right now. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.